Whew. First and foremost, to Steph Curry's overall all-around performance at the age of 37 years, 6'2" point guard. No player of this size at this age has ever put up a performance like this. Steph Curry was majestic and epic from the get-go. 52 points in this game, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 steals, a block, a complete stat line conducive to that of a 28-year-old in his prime. Obviously, and needless to say, if Steph Curry doesn't go completely bonkers in this game, the Warriors do not have a shot. There's no way the Warriors would have had a chance of winning this game. But boy, was it far from perfect. So many issues that we need to get to in regards to this game. And to be fair to them, the Warriors ended up playing 8-on-5 in this game because the refs were in on it very clearly. It is just simply unreal how obvious it is that the NBA is actively rooting against Steph Curry and the Warriors. It's so blatantly rigged. Mark Davis and his crew is so obviously just calling the game in favor of the Grizzlies. And we'll get to some of those nuances throughout the course of this video as well. But if you like what you're hearing so far, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Now, let's get straight to it. So, the refs. Oh my goodness. It's just so blatant. Anytime Steph Curry gets fouled, he just has to hit the ground really hard, blatantly, in order for the refs to make any calls on him. Even when he does fall hard to the ground, they still don't make the calls. Remember when he ended up injuring his tailbone and he was blatantly shoved to the ground and no call was made? I mean, this is just a great example of how the NBA refs do not protect Steph Curry whatsoever. And that, of course, is thanks to the fact that the NBA is a Nike league. They are in cahoots with Nike, and the refs are clearly being controlled by those guys in some manner. Yeah, just remember the fact that Steph Curry is challenging this entire league to be the greatest and the best player on the planet, and well, that would be a major problem for Nike, wouldn't it? So the Warriors get off to a great start. Specifically, Steph Curry gets off to a great start. The Warriors get out to a 22-14 start with Steph Curry going 3 of 3 from the floor for 8 early points. But he doesn't stop there. He makes another shot, and another shot, and another shot. And before you know it, Steph Curry has 19 points in the first quarter. 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. That's his stat line at the end of the first quarter. Unreal. And because he was playing so well, the Warriors actually scored 45 points in that first quarter. And boy, did they need every single bucket to ensure that they would come away with a win in this game. But now we're going to get to some issues. As you guys know, if you're on this channel, I have been warning all along for months and months and months now about the viability or the non-viability of certain combinations and certain lineups against more serious teams, against playoff teams with more size. And sure, Steph Curry got going in that first quarter, and yes, the Warriors got off to an unbelievable start. But you saw how the game started to erode with certain guys in the rotation and certain lineups being played too much. In order for the Warriors to be the kind of elite, playoff caliber and championship caliber team, in order for this team to look that powerful, if they're able to score 45 points in the first quarter, they have to be able to do a better job than to also allow the Grizzlies to score 32 points. And then comes the second quarter and the Warriors end up getting outscored 34-29. And to me, that's partly happening because Quinton Post got into the game too early. He should not be the first center off the Warriors bench. It should be Kevon Looney. And yes, Quinton Post started off 2 of 4 from the floor. He had 2 3-point shots in that first quarter. But what the Warriors coaching staff doesn't seem to be considering is the fact that the other team starts to gain confidence and they start to gain momentum when they have a guy like Quinton Post out there, because simply put, his defense is not good enough. And when your center's defense is not good enough, it's going to give the other team confidence to feel like they can score anytime they want to and get whatever they want. And thereby, they'll be able to get right back into the game no matter how many points they ended up giving up in that first quarter. And yes, that's exactly what ended up happening. The Grizzlies ended up scoring 66 points of their own in that first half. And that's not championship caliber. And as you guys know, there's a part of me that does like Quinton Post's ability to shoot the ball. But you never prioritize that offensive aspect of his game over what he can do defensively and whether he can actually hold ground against real teams and do real things from a defensive standpoint, like being able to get rebounds in traffic, hustle for loose balls, being able to defend a variety of guys when they enter the paint area, just a lot of different factors. Quinton Post, not only is he severely limited from a defensive standpoint, pretty much everywhere on the floor, even from a scoring standpoint, he's just not reliable in that paint area unless he's out at the three-point line. That's about it at this point. And that's cool in the regular season. And that's cool for very small spot minutes. But he can't be playing double the amount of minutes of a guy like Kevon Looney. That just simply can't happen. And we saw a glimpse of what happens when you allow something like that to occur. One particular play I remember in that first half, Ja Morant was stuck in the right corner because Quinton Post was right there and his man was guarding him from the side. So they pretty much had him trapped. All Quinton Post had to do, because he's got a big frame as a 7-footer, is to collapse that space and force Ja Morant into a difficult situation. Instead, he's just standing there, allowing Ja Morant all the room to get out of that situation. And he does make the pass to the other side of the floor. And now you're in a situation where Quinton Post has to move himself over to the opposite corner. And now he's trying to guard Scottie Pippen Jr. in the corner. Scottie Pippen Jr. barely throws up a pump fake and Quinton Post simply falls for it and allows Pippen Jr. to get to the line. See, that's the kind of play where if it was Looney instead of Post, that's probably going to end up being a turnover for the Grizzlies. And again, sure, it's great that the Warriors were able to score 45 points, but the defense wasn't good enough to close the game, and they ended up allowing 32 points to the Grizzlies. I would rather the score be something like 40 points for the Warriors and 24 points for the Grizzlies. Because yes, the Warriors may end up scoring 4 to 6 points less, but you're also holding the other team from getting what they want. And that is how championship caliber teams create separation. And that's the kind of connectivity that we are looking for from the Warriors as they gear for the playoffs. Because that is what it's going to take for the Warriors to try to win a title this year. Steve Kerr at this juncture of the season must stop prioritizing his offense over his defense. And by the way, let me just say this about Kevon Looney, who hit another 3-point shot with 1 second left on the shot clock. He hits kind of a step back 3-point shot from the corner with 1 second left on the shot clock in this game. So this is now the second consecutive game where Looney has hit a 3-point shot. And you know what's really sad about that? Kevon Looney from the previous game stated that he worked on his 3-point shooting all off season long, only to never get a play called for him to have any opportunity to show that he can shoot that in the game. We're only now learning that he's capable of shooting that with 7 games left to go on the season. It took 74 games for Steve Kerr to acknowledge the fact that Kevon Looney worked his tail off to be able to shoot 3-point shots this season, and he was never given that opportunity. I mean, talk about disempowerment. But I will say this, Steve Kerr did smarten up in the second half of the game in that third quarter. The first guy that came off the bench was not Post like it was in the first half. He put Looney into the game in that third quarter. And that was able to salvage the disastrous start that was the third quarter for that starting lineup, that small starting lineup, as they got out to a 22-10 deficit in that third quarter. And Steve just sat there and let it all happen with the exact same unit, despite the fact that it was obvious that that unit wasn't good enough or big enough to get stops against the Grizzlies in the second half. Next thing you know, what was once a 16-17 point lead for the Warriors in the first quarter ends up being a deficit in that third quarter. But again, a better defensive unit, a more capable lineup of Kevon Looney and Guy Santos at the power forward and center spot did much better next to Steph Curry. Steph Curry still had it rolling in that third quarter, and those guys were able to stop the bleeding, and this allowed the Grizzlies from building a bigger lead because they had all the momentum. I'm telling you, to start off the first and the third quarter against most of these teams with more size that are playoff teams, the Warriors are going to have to go bigger. They're going to have to switch this up. And they need to get more reps with some of those lineups so that they understand what they're going to go into the playoffs. I'm going to say it again. The 3-point shooting ability of Quinton Post is not worth it if the defense doesn't stay connected in a powerful way. No matter what you can do offensively, you have to be able to cover the prerequisites of being a rotational piece for a championship caliber team. If you can't cover those prerequisites, your minutes are going to turn into non-playoff contending minutes, and you're going to lose those minutes. And when you lose those minutes, you lose the margin for error a championship caliber team would otherwise have. Now I want to show you a couple of plays to end that second quarter where Ja Morant had some foul trouble. He had 2 fouls, so he had to be careful. But there was one play late in the fourth quarter where he clearly fouled Steph Curry from behind and the refs pretend that it never happened, and then the Grizzlies get out to transition. And that should have been Ja Morant's 3rd foul. That should have gotten into foul trouble, which would have been an advantage for the Warriors. But of course, the refs, recognizing that, refused to give that foul to Ja Morant, as if that wasn't enough. A couple of plays down later, Moses Moody has complete positional advantage to grab an offensive rebound, and Ja Morant blatantly shoves him just about as hard as he could, not once, but twice, and Moses Moody ends up just falling to the ground because he's getting shoved from the back as he's trying to jump. And once again, the refs pretend that that play didn't happen, even though it was so blatant and right in their faces. Meanwhile, earlier in that second quarter, they're calling fouls like this on Pods, who did end up getting into foul trouble and had to sit out for the second half of the second quarter. I mean, look at this play. They call that a foul on Pods, and the Warriors are simply flabbergasted. I mean, in a close game like this, those are gigantic calls or no calls. And by the way, Ja Morant was pretty much getting whatever he wanted in this game, and that's a major problem for the Warriors going into the playoffs if they can't stop perimeter guys better than what they did tonight. And needless to say, they really missed GP2 in this one because he's the one guy that is capable of doing a half-decent job on a guy like Ja Morant. But if you can't stop a guy like that from the perimeter, then it becomes anybody's game. And when it becomes anybody's game, you are no longer championship caliber, you may just be playoff caliber. You see the level that I am wanting to see the Warriors get to, and certain things need to be in place for that to happen. And because the Warriors simply don't have like a really dominant POA type of guy anymore on their roster, they can at the very least become a bigger overall team. And that's going to improve their defense in other ways. So like I said, they went with a different iteration in that third quarter with Kevon Looney entering the game before Post, which was much needed. And then Post ended up playing the final minute of that third quarter, and even then he allowed something ridiculously easy in the paint, and his lack of mobility, like his feet are just stuck to the ground. And then Steve Kerr goes to that Jimmy Butler centric lineup again in that fourth quarter, and I believe it was Post, Moody, Butler, Draymond, and Post. And those lineups worked well in the earlier part of the season. And again, like I said, those lineups are cool in the regular season, but it's going to be harder to sustain those lineups against more serious teams. And Post recently said in an interview he's not used to getting up this many 3-point shots up, and that he's starting to feel some fatigue. I mean, that's another issue right there. If he's not going to be good enough to hit his 3-point shots more consistently, then it doesn't warrant for him to be out there on the floor, because he's a negative just about in everything else that he does. Yeah, 20 minutes in this game, 1 rebound. I mean, this is unacceptable. And think, he shot 2 of 3 to start the game from the 3-point line. He shot 3 of 9 for the game, which means he went 1 of 7 for the rest of the game after that first quarter. He should not be doubling Kevon Looney's playing time. Kevon Looney got 10 minutes in this game. Post got 20 minutes in this game. If those roles were reversed, I think the Warriors would have won this game much easier than what they ended up having to do. 3 of 9 tonight, 1 of 6 the game before, 3 of 9 the game before that, 1 of 4 the game before that. It's time for the Warriors to get more serious because they almost tricked this game away doing these things. This is a major F around and find out situation that they just don't need to be doing. And man, Buddy Hield ended up hitting a big 3-point shot in that fourth quarter, but for a chunk of this game, he was pretty much useless. I couldn't believe my eyes. Steve Kerr has Buddy Hield guarding Ja Morant as a POA, and Ja Morant is pretty much getting whatever he wants every single time that happened. And we got a glimpse of the kind of headaches that we're going to end up getting with Buddy Hield in rotation for the playoffs. But again, at the very least, he ended up hitting that one big 3-point shot in that fourth quarter that gave the Warriors the briefest moment of breathing space. Oh, and by the way, Jimmy Butler had quite a game himself. 27.6 rebounds, 4 assists, and this was a really gutsy performance from him because he ended up spraining his ankle in that second half, and he was just gutting through it. Hopefully it won't swell up or anything like that in the coming days. Hopefully it won't hurt him too much to the point that he has to sit out a game or something along those lines, because they're going to need him this entire week. And man, you look at that stat sheet, it's pretty much flawless. The guy went 12 of 12 from the free throw line, 7 of 11 from the floor, hyper efficient, 3 steals, and not surprisingly, he is tough as nails. It's so interesting looking at the stat sheet after the game, and you look at all these numbers and you're just like, whoa. I didn't know all that was going on. Literally, I did not know Jimmy Butler had 27 points until after the game. Same thing with Steph Curry, actually. I had no idea that he reached the 50-point mark until after the game. And we can celebrate these great games when it comes in a victory like this one. Draymond was a major liability from a shooting standpoint. He shot 1 of 7 from the three-point line. The Grizzlies were basically daring him to shoot, and he just couldn't hit the side of a barn tonight. But he as well made up for it with an all-around play. Draymond actually had a triple-double in this game. 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. Tough defense across the board. They obviously don't get this done without him. And to close the game, Steve ended up going to his starting lineup, the small lineup with Potts and Moody in there next to Steph Curry. And I did not very much like seeing that, because there are just some fundamental things missing in there that I just don't trust enough for them to be closing caliber for a majority of the games. But credit where credit is due. There was one play where Steph Curry missed a 3-point shot and Paz ran in to grab an offensive rebound. Nobody was boxing him out. Ja Morant was oblivious, and Paz was able to grab the rebound and put it back in. The Warriors had a 3-point lead at the time, and that putback by Brandon Podziemski gave the Warriors a much-needed 5-point cushion with 1 minute left in that fourth quarter. And then the next play down, the Warriors are trying to get the ball to Steph Curry, who was getting top-locked by Desmond Bane. And honestly, Jimmy Butler did have an opportunity to get the ball to Steph Curry, but kind of looked him off, and the ball kind of swung around, and it ended up finding Moses Moody in the corner, and he was left wide open. The Grizzlies disrespected him and assumed that he was not going to be able to hit that shot at this juncture of the game, and Moses Moody made them pay with a shot that hit nothing but net. Gave the Warriors an 8-point cushion, and that is all she wrote. So despite the fact that both of them were basically not really good enough in this game for a lot of different reasons, when it mattered most, both of those guys individually came up with some clutch plays. But man, back to Steph Curry for a second. Some of the shots that he was hitting was just simply out of this world. There was one shot that he hit in transition towards the end of that second quarter, and it's just like, oh my gosh, what is this guy doing? He was just out of this world in that first half. And when I see Steph being aggressive and the play call is basically run some high screens for Steph Curry from up top and allow him to dictate what's going to happen, those are some of my favorite plays, because I trust Steph Curry above all else on this team. And when he's on fire, that is the scariest version of Steph Curry. And this marks the 10th time that Steph Curry has scored 50 points or more since turning 30 years old. He leads all players in NBA history when it comes to scoring 50 points or more after turning 30 years old. Funny for the greatest shooter of all time to also be the most prolific scorer of all time after turning the age of 30, despite being the smallest guy on the list at 6'2". And man, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was kind of relieved that Jonathan Kuminga was not available for this game, because if they included his minutes next to the minutes that Post was giving in this game, alongside the minutes that Buddy Hield was giving in this game, the Warriors would not have won this game. I just don't believe it. And sorry to say, maybe I'm not even sorry to say at this point, because I care about the greatness of the Warriors a lot more than catering to the needs of some fourth-year player that's still not ready to play playoff caliber basketball. I would prefer that the Warriors end up having to play the Lakers the next game also without him in the equation, because I just think that the Warriors have an easier time playing better overall basketball for longer stretches and are stayed connected for a longer period of time when he's not a part of the equation. Sorry. That just is what it is for me at this point. But all around, what a gutsy win it was, because this win puts the Warriors in the 5th seed over the Grizzlies. Finally, they are above that 6th seed, and they don't have to worry about the Clippers and the Wolves catching up to them, because now even the Grizzlies are behind them. But the thing is, the Warriors must continue to win these games. They have another 3 games coming up against playoff teams for the remainder of this week, and they need to make sure, just like they did tonight, they have to find a way to take care of business and win those games. Because guess what? They're 2 games behind the Lakers right now for that 4th seed, and that's the team that they play next. And as long as they continue to win these games, they control their own destiny in terms of what positioning they're going to end up before this season is done. They could still very well end up being in the play-in seed if things go south from here on out. Whereas if they continue to take care of business, they may end up getting home court advantage in the first round. Huge difference right there. Home court advantage in the first round or a play-in team. That's how close things are. Despite the fact that they're the 5th seed now, the 7th and the 8th seed are only 1 game back from them. It's no longer a marathon. This is now becoming a sprint to the finish line. Thank God that Jimmy Butler's ankle injury was not worse than what it looked like. And thank God for the fact that he's one tough SOB. And thank God for Steph Curry, because what a miraculous player he is indeed. I'm so relieved and glad to see the Warriors get the win tonight. And man, I hadn't been screaming the way I was in this game throughout the course of this game in quite a while. The intensity level is through the roof, and that's how it's going to be moving forward. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this win as much as I did. Until next time.